Hello and welcome to Positive Talk. Today on the program we are talking about one worrying issue that we are witnessing as Zimbabweans. Every day when we open the newspaper, when we listen to the radio, watch the news on television, we're witnessing an increase in the number of rape cases that Zimbabweans are experiencing, and I'm talking about Zimbabwean ladies, as well as even the issues of sexual abuse of the girl child. And when we are talking about abuse, it might not be penetration per se, but there are different forms of abuse that come in, where sometimes some adolescents are even talking about sexually transmitted grades that they need to get when they're at university, where a lecturer would say, for you to get this particular mark, you need to do A, B, C, D with me. And today we are joined on the program by one adolescent, 22 years old. She is a budding entrepreneur, and in her day-to-day business as well, looking for business when she goes to companies, organizations, for her to get those contracts. A number of times she has been asked to secure those through sexual favors. So she's going to be sharing with us her experience. I'd like to welcome you to Positive Talk.
Thank you.
As a budding entrepreneur, you have faced those requests wherever you go. Could you share with us your experience?
Besides doing my business, I also write for a theater group. So I was the mediator between the theater group and the people who were responsible for the arts. So when I went there, the person who was supposed to interview me suggested that I could be the one who takes all the credit for the theater group and make the theater group seem as my supporting crew, and I get the opportunity of being a star. So I told them that I'm gonna think about it. And when I left the offices, I started thinking about how I was going to be the star that he was promising me to be. So it meant that I would betray my theater group, the trust that they have entrusted in me to go and speak on their behalf. So later on that evening, he sent me a message. So there's this show, do you want to go with me? I said, no, I'm very young and I have a curfew, so I cannot go with you. And then he suggested, so where do you live? And then I said, I told him where I lived. And then he said, can I come there? So I noticed that the transition in this conversation was not good. So I just said night and then slept. I never responded to his messages, nor talked to him again. So I went to the theater group to find another person who can be the mediator.
But did it succeed now in the venture that they wanted to do?
No, it did not.
So in your own analysis, when you're looking at this experience that you had with your theater group, would you then say the contract, the engagement didn't materialize because you had refused to do what the guy wanted you to do?
I think to a larger extent, the contract didn't materialize because of that. Maybe if I had agreed, we would have been talking about something else today. So basically that's it.
And your second experience?
My second experience is me as a businesswoman. I'm into stationery, and my job was to supply stationery, corporate branded. So I went to this particular institution, which is well recognized. So I was referred by another institute. They had said, if you go there and look for this particular person, they'll assist you so that you get orders. At that moment, my company was very small, so any big order meant that it was a breakthrough for me. So I went there innocently and I pitched my product to them. And then he said, okay, that's very interesting, I'll get back to you. So I followed up a few weeks later and no one got back to me. So I just said to myself, I just let it go. And then a month later, the person who was supposed to see texted me on WhatsApp, "Hi, and how are you?" And then I said, "I'm fine, and I remembered of you when I saw your product in my drawer." "Okay, you saw my products in your drawer today, a month later?" "Yeah, it reminded me of you." And then he started saying that his friend who had referred me to him, Anopenga, because how can he even ask a pretty woman like you to come to my office? And I noticed that this conversation was getting too personal. Then he suggested that he could, if I wanted a massage. I'm like, "No, I don't want a massage." And then I went to the person who referred me and I asked him, "So what should I do?" And then he said, "Okay, from what we have been learning, how you react to these particular things are going to affect how you're going to react to anything else that's going to come into your life. So you're a businesswoman, you're going to intimidate men, and that's the only weapon they can use to demotivate you or to get you out of the business. So you need to do the right thing. I can't tell you not to do it, because it also goes to your personal values." So I just say thank you, and then I never spoke to the men again. I didn't even collect my samples. I just left them there.
Would you say this is a common problem that adolescent girls, young girls, are facing on a day-to-day basis?
Right now, it's more rife because of the economic situation. You find that for girls to survive, they're actually getting into this situations whereby they are asked to give something in return for something. So as desperation rises, people tend to do the extreme. So I'm guessing that it's a very common situation. It's a common problem that women are facing, or young ladies are facing every day.
For her, she was lucky that the messages, the advances were coming through WhatsApp. Who knows what would have happened if that was in an office? Join us after the break. Welcome back. We continue with our program, where today we're talking about issues of challenges that adolescent girls face on a day-to-day basis, issues of sexual harassment, issues of rape that has become quite rampant in our country. I'm now joined by Charmaine Picardo. Charmaine is with Safaids. She is a colleague. Charmaine, welcome to Positive Talk.
Thank you, Tari.
Yes, I know as we're preparing for the recording of this program, you went out, you were interacting with a number of young girls, and a lot of them justifiably were not keen on coming out because most of them are still at the schools where these situations are happening. They're still within the same jobs where these situations are happening. Could you share with us what you found out?
Okay, thank you, Tari. It was quite depressing, actually, because the stories are a lot and they're very serious, and the young people are not forthcoming. They're not willing to share their stories on TV. That's how serious it is. We had one person sharing, unfortunately she had to give in, pressures from home. You also want to provide, you finish school, you have to get the job. When she went to interview for the job, a very senior executive asked for sexual favors. The only way you get this job, qualified as she was told the only way she could get the job was if she slept with the senior executive. And she went ahead and she did that. And the executive did quite a number on her. I'm sorry, for lack of a better word, I'll say that, because even her self-esteem and her self-confidence were destroyed. That's why she wasn't willing to come out to be on screen, because she's very shaken. Her very foundation, her very core is shaken. There are threats of, if you decide to withdraw from this job, I'll make sure that you never get another job in the same sector again. If you do this, I know your mother needs this money. I know this about your family. So it's very serious, and she wasn't the only one. we had several young people that were sharing stories, and some, it didn't go to that extent, but you had very senior people, very powerful people in organizations saying things to them or advancing, commenting on their bodies, or now even touching, tapping something, and then they laugh about it. And the worst thing is you have colleagues that see it, but they'll laugh about it, or they'll say, oh, that's how things are in this organization, or that's what we do, or that's what that director does that all the time. And it's sort of becoming normalized and accepted. So even sometimes when you have a very brilliant young person coming in, she doesn't get the opportunity to advance. Or sometimes someone else comes in, they have another different panel, but now you have the people in the organization saying, oh, you got in because of this person, and now looking at issues of even their general well-being, issues of their mental health, whilst they're at the organization.
So in your own analysis, how best can we address this challenge?
I think the first thing really is to do away with the normalization of sexual harassment. Because when you have people saying, doza ziri, that's how things are done, you sort of make it normal. But it's not normal. It shouldn't be like that. It's not okay. And I think the other thing also is encouraging people to speak out. If it's possible to have, even at every organization, every university, every college, a system that is supportive. Because from my interactions with the young people, what's lacking is a supportive system. Because they'll say the moment I report, I'm blacklisted by everyone in the organization or everyone in the department. If I try anything else, I'm not allowed to even do anything else. There was a young person that shared an experience of her friend who graduated this past graduation from one of the top universities in the country, and her supervisor failed their dissertation. And with most of our universities, if you fail the dissertation, you can't graduate. And the reason why she had failed is because she turned down the supervisor. And now when she went and approached the department and said, this is what happened, the dean of the department, this is what happened to me, please look at my dissertation. The dean wasn't even forthcoming, and this is a male as well. And there were people, lecturers in the department, that were asked to look at it, and they all said, well, I'm not willing to look at that dissertation, or the other person gave another excuse, until the parents had to approach the vice chancellor of the university, and the vice chancellor appointed then an independent person to look at the dissertation, and she passed. She just graduated. And the thing is, it only happened just before the graduation. That's when she was helped. Now she had a very supportive system around her, the parents and everyone else around her. But imagine a young person that is isolated. They have to go through this. And in some instances, it's very forced. And not even in every instance
it's forced.
It's forced.
Yeah.
And because you don't have a system there to support you, or you can't report, sometimes it ends up being rape.
Yeah.
And once it's rape, it's even worse. The young person trying to pick up the pieces now, issues of them recovering, psychologically and physically recovering from it. And I think that the thing that we need is to have that system, to have somebody who's independent, somebody who's willing to stand up for them, whether it's the university, whether it's the workplace, and even strengthening, human resource systems in organizations to say if somebody reports, how do you protect them from being victimized once you've reported? How do you have a system that's very supportive, that are able to do an investigation without making this young person feel that she's done something really wrong, or even protecting the young person where once they come forward and they report the incident?
A lot of young people, when you talk to them, families are not supportive. In instances of abuse, in instances of rape, where sometimes with rape it happens, it's the closest person within the family who has done that. And people are saying, uda tisungise baba ere, uda tisungise hundreds yangu ere. How best can families address this issue, coming from a young person's perspective?
I think it comes from families understanding how serious rape is. It robs you of the very person that you are. If you're able to understand that. And the other thing is protecting someone who's done this. you're giving room for another young person within the family to be abused now. Where you could stop that immediately, you report, you're able to protect the other people in the family and also protect the person, that has been assaulted. So with families, what I would actually encourage is to report immediately, whether it's the father, it's the uncle. Look at what has been done to this person. You need to report. If the father has done this, he's not a father that is you can trust anymore. It's not a father that you can look up to in the family anymore. He's given up his role as a father, because once you do that, you are not a father, because you're supposed to be there to protect. Whether you're a brother or an uncle, your job is to protect. So once you become the perpetrator, you're not the protector anymore. And society has to deal with that. You have to be taken away from society, so you are reformed or rehabilitated before you are even let back into the family or into the society.
Well, you heard it from Charmaine. What I'm getting from young people, yes, issues and cases of abuse are quite prevalent. They're increasing on a day-to-day basis. This is worrying for us as Zimbabweans. And like what she is saying, as families, as communities, what role are we playing to ensure that that girl next to me is protected within the workplace, within the school system, within the whole environment? Join us after the break. Welcome back. We continue with our discussion. And on the program now, I'm joined by Nyaradzo Mashayamombe. She is the Executive Director for Tege Life International. Nyari, welcome to Positive Talk.
Thank you. Hello, Zimbabwe.
I want to hear your comment first, taking from what Charmaine was talking about, as well as our first interview in the first segment.
Probably more than half women have experienced some form of sexual assault or abuse. Abuse, we're just not talking about penetration, like you said earlier on. We are talking about even uchifamba kuridzirwa muridzo. It's our men don't understand the level of dehumanization, the level of confidence that's taken away from you. But also the most important, that every time you come out of the house, you're thinking about the guy aripakona chandiridza muridzo. So it becomes a problem. So those are some of the issues that we're talking about here. Just saying, oh, amai makabatana, things like that. It's very disrespectful, very unsettling, it makes women conscious when they're walking, when they leave their house. When you're putting on your dress, you have to think about somebody else who is not part of your life, how they're going to comment on how you're dressed. When you're dressed, however you're dressed, our men and boys just think that they can just say things to women. And I think that it's high time, even in Zimbabwe, we have a law that protects women against violence in public spaces. Yes, we're talking about private spaces, a lot of violence, but also just giving an example of that rampant abuse of women and girls in the public spaces. So abuse of sexual nature, just understanding that young women, to get opportunities in this difficult environment, over and above the fact that there are young people who don't have opportunities in our country, they face a further bigger problem, that instead of just getting the little opportunities that are there for everyone, including the men, they have to go the extra mile of being violated and abused even at school. It's really sad. As a country, it really reflects on the need that we have.
We are normalizing abuse. We are normalizing rape as a community, because when it happens, it's when it happens to a woman.
As I was listening to you, I felt like it's a culture of rape, it's a culture of abuse. When you're growing up, I think if we were to take any survey right now and say, when you're growing up, as you're growing up as a young woman, would see that probably 90 to 95% of young women or girls or even women have been abused, not only by men, but even by their own mothers, own aunties and all that. So it is really a culture that has normalized rape, that has normalized abuse, that has normalized the discrimination against women. So it's so much so that men find it so easy to then say, if Tari violates me or it contributes to to my beating or to my sexual violation, men will be like, oh, why don't you listen to the other women? What do you think is so special about you? So that is the normalization and the culture that she was talking about, to say, yes, we have an abused culture in Zimbabwe. Yes, it's a very patriarchal society where people actually think that just because you're a woman you can't abuse me, but we need to see beyond Tari and say, what shaped Tari? What structure? How was she socialized? Tari was socialized to hold me accountable so that I'm not free, so that there is a perpetuation. So I like to say that the setup in our culture is such a way that men have expectation of how women should behave or should be dealt with, and then they train the women, their wives, then everybody, to say this is what we expect of this household. Therefore the women are caused to monitor and to implement patriarchy, and then when we're looking at it and say, oh, the other women are doing it, oh, why don't you be like the other women, oh, why don't you listen to the other women? So I think it's important to raise our daughters and our young women to say that it doesn't matter who is saying what. It doesn't matter if your sister is saying this. It doesn't matter if your aunt is saying this. It doesn't matter if your mother is saying this, as long as it's wrong, if you feel like it's wrong. And I think many years back, Zimbabwe was kind of building now to giving a social protection culture where even the Department of Social Services or Social Welfare was promoting children to come and report, because they understood that rape and abuse is happening in the household. Therefore, children would be encouraged to come and report. They're still being encouraged to come and report, but because of the economic hardships, they don't have resources to follow up on these cases, and therefore we have a culture that's just rampant on women and girls abuse.
So where do we go from here as a nation?
And I think for me, it's important to also acknowledge the men and the women who get it. It's also important to say, for instance, I know in Zimbabwe we've got a structure called Men Engage, where we are working with boys and men. Organizations are coming together. I know SAFA is coordinating that. A group of organizations that are saying we need the men, we need the boys, we need the community leaders, we need everyone to rally behind and understand that gender norms that expose girls and young women to abuse, we need to get rid of them, and men and boys are partners in doing that. So I think it's important that we engage boys, men, the women, the girls themselves, to empower each other to get age relevant people relevant. If we're talking about the girls, let them be empowered by the knowledge of their rights. When we're talking about the boys and the men, we address the issues, these sexism, machismo, chauvinistic attitudes that expose girls and young women to abuse, to discrimination, and also educating our communities, to make sure that they know that some of the perpetuation that they do really has deep rooting. And one of the things that we can begin to do, especially for young women and even young men, is that they begin to question things with their mothers. Us, the young women, the girls, the boys, and even the husbands, challenging some of these social norms. As I mentioned, we do have husbands who are beginning to challenge and to support women. So we need that happening. And also just to have community that speaks against violence and discrimination against women. I don't know if we're going to talk about that issue in that happened where people were iconizing that statement that says Dobatadi Paya. And one of the most important issues that's coming out of it is community was up in arms with the young sex workers or the women that were raped, and saying, oh well, why did you report? It's sad, because we are now becoming a people who support criminalism. Martin Luther once said, if you keep quiet in times where you need to speak, well, paraphrase, if you keep quiet when you need to speak up, then you are part of the perpetrators. You are supporting evil. So I think as communities, we need communities that speak out against abuse, that support survivors, that support victims, and actually support them to go and report and hold the police and others accountable to say, community, what did you do about them? They should refuse to stay with my perpetrators in their communities. That's who people would protect Ivana, people would protect women. If there's anything else that you are not okay about, it's not for you to then say because she's a sex worker, therefore ngarepwe. Akuna mna anofana kurepwa, akuna mna anofana kupondwa. Azvibvumidzwe izvozvo.
Well, you heard it, Zimbabwe. let's not normalize abuse. Let's not normalize sexual abuse of the girl child. Any form of abuse against a girl child. You and I have a role to play. Until we meet again next week, goodbye.